The day I accidentally saw my family's group chat, I understood everything. I wasn't losing my memory. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't too sensitive or too old or too anything. I was just inconvenient. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how 14 people including my own son, planned my future without me, and what I did when I found out. I'm 72 years old. I've lived in the same house on Cedar Street for 43 years. It's a small house, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with cabinets that don't quite close right, but it's mine. My husband George and I bought it in 1983, 6 months after we got married. He was a high school math teacher. I worked at the county clerk's office. We didn't have much, but we had each other. We raised our son David in this house. Sunday dinners were sacred: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans from the garden. David's friends were always welcome. They'd come over after school, raid the refrigerator, call me Mrs. E. I loved every minute of it. When David married Patricia 16 years ago, I welcomed her like a daughter. She was quiet at first, polite. She'd help with dishes, ask for recipes. I thought, good, he chose well. George passed away 3 years ago. Heart attack, sudden. One morning he was reading the paper in his chair, and by evening he was gone. I thought about selling the house. Too many memories, everyone said. But I couldn't. Every room held something. The hallway where David took his first steps. The kitchen where George taught me to make his mother's pie. The living room where we celebrated 40 Christmases. I stayed. And I told myself, at least I still have them. At least I still have my family. I live 10 minutes from David's house. I see my grandchildren almost every week. Clara, who is 14, she has George's laugh, and the twins, Leo and Maya, who are 9, they have my stubbornness, God help them. Or, at least, I thought I did. That was before I found out about the group chat. It started small, the way these things always do. In October, Clara had a school play, The Wizard of Oz. She was a munchkin. She'd been practicing for weeks, singing Ding Dong the Witch is Dead every time she came over. I found out about the play the morning after, from a photo Patricia posted on Facebook. There was Clara in her little costume, standing with David and Patricia and the twins. The caption said, "Proud parents of a little munchkin." I called David that afternoon. "Oh, Mom," he said, "it was last minute. We didn't want to stress you out with the traffic and all." I said nothing. I wrote it down. Then Thanksgiving came. I spent all Wednesday making my sweet potato casserole, the one George's mother taught me, the one I've made for 40 years. I packed it up, drove to David's house, walked in with that dish like I'd done every year since 1983. The table was already set. Patricia had organized everything. There were 3 sweet potato dishes, one from a can, one from the bakery, and one that looked like it came from some fancy cooking magazine. My casserole sat on the counter, untouched, the whole night. David saw me looking at it. "We just wanted to try something new, Mom. You know, mix it up." He didn't look at me when he said it. I said nothing. I wrote it down. Then Christmas came. David sent me a text, asking me to bring a pie. Not a conversation, not a phone call, not, "Hey Mom, we'd love to have you early to visit with the kids." Just a text, like I was a neighbor, not his mother. I brought the pie. I stayed 3 hours. I watched my grandchildren open presents, and I noticed they didn't run to me the way they used to. They'd gotten used to me not being there. I still said nothing, but I was beginning to understand. Something was being built around me, something I hadn't been invited to join. Then came that Tuesday afternoon in January. Clara showed up at my door alone. No parents, no twins, just her. She had her backpack slung over one shoulder and that teenage expression that could mean anything. "Grandma, can I hang out here for a while?" I almost cried. She still wanted to hang out with her old grandma. We sat at the kitchen table. I made hot chocolate the way I used to when she was small. She talked about school, about a boy named Ethan who sat behind her in science class, about how her mom was so annoying about her grades. I listened. I soaked it in. And then she left her phone on the counter when she went to the bathroom. I wasn't looking for anything, I want you to understand that. I just glanced at the screen when it lit up. A mother's habit, I guess, always noticing things. The notification at the top said, Family Plans, 47 new messages. I knew I shouldn't look, I knew it, but my finger moved before my brain could stop it. The chat had 14 members. 14. David, Patricia, Patricia's sister and her husband, Patricia's parents, David's cousin, even Patricia's niece who lives in Florida. 14 people. I scrolled slowly. The messages went back months. There were the birthday photos I hadn't seen, Clara's party at a trampoline park, Leo and Maya's joint party with a bouncy house, a vacation to the coast in April that nobody had mentioned. There were discussions about coordinating the holidays that had been running since September. Who would host what? Who would bring which dish? Which days worked for everyone? Everyone except me. And then, near the top of the thread, a message from Patricia, dated 3 weeks ago. She had written, Once we figure out the house situation, everything will be so much simpler. The house situation. My house. The home George and I built together. The house where David learned to walk, where Clara took her first steps in that same hallway, where the twins still sleep in the room with the blue curtains when they visit. That house was a situation, to be figured out. I heard Clara coming back. I set the phone down, face up, exactly where she'd left it. She came in, grabbed her phone, said, Thanks for the hot chocolate, Grandma. I walked her to the door. I hugged her maybe a second longer than usual. Then I sat in George's old armchair in the quiet of my living room, and I thought very carefully about what I was going to do next. I did not cry. I had learned a long time ago that tears are for after. First, you think. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and a cup of tea that went cold hours ago. I wrote down what I knew. They had a group chat, 14 members. I was not one of them. They had been planning for months without me. They were talking about my house. Then I wrote down what I had. My house, my name on the deed, 43 years of memories, but also 43 years of documents. A granddaughter who still loved me enough to show up on a Tuesday afternoon. The next morning I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Margaret Chen. She's been my attorney for 15 years, handled George's will, our estate, everything. I told her I needed to come in. I told her I needed to review my documents and make some changes. She didn't ask why, she just said, Thursday at 10 works. The second call was to my financial advisor, a kind man named Robert, who'd been managing our savings since George retired. I asked him to do a full review of every account, every asset, every property deed, and to send me printed copies. Of everything. Printed, he said? You usually prefer digital. This time I want paper, I said. Old school. The third call was the one that mattered most. I called Clara. Clara, it's Grandma. I'm not angry with you about the phone. You showed me something important, and I'd like to show you something back. She was quiet for a moment, then, Okay, Grandma. Can you come over Saturday? Just you. I'll make cookies. She came. That Saturday, while we baked chocolate chip cookies, I told her about my plan. Not the whole plan, just the part I needed her help with. I'm going to start a new group chat, I said. Just the grandkids, no parents. You in? Her face lit up. For real? For real. What should we call it? She thought for a second. Grandma's Kitchen. I smiled. Grandma's Kitchen it is. I opened my phone, created a new chat, and added 4 people. Clara, Leo, Maya, and my daughter's son, Marcus, who I hadn't seen nearly enough. Then I typed the first message. Welcome to Grandma's Kitchen. Cookies are always baking, stories are always welcome, and the only rule is No parents allowed. I didn't know it then, but that chat would change everything. Over the next 6 weeks, Grandma's kitchen became something I never expected. Clara started texting me every morning. Little things, a funny thing that happened at school, a song she was learning, a question about whether her friend was being fair to her. Leo started texting Mania about how much they wanted a new puppy. Marcus, my daughter's boy, 20 years old, quiet and serious, sent me a picture of the sunrise one morning with no message attached, just the picture. I printed it out and put it on the refrigerator. 847 messages in 6 weeks. I counted every single one. I was not lonely. I was not a burden. I was not a situation. I was a grandmother, talking to my grandchildren the way it was always supposed to be. Meanwhile, David sent me a text. "Mom, we want to have a family meeting, Sunday at 3, important." I knew what the meeting was about, so I made my final phone call. I asked Margaret Chen if she'd be available Sunday at 3. She said yes. I told her to bring the documents. Sunday arrived colder than I expected. January gray, the kind that seeps into your bones. I dressed carefully, navy dress, pearls, the ones George gave me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look like myself, like the woman I'd always been. I arrived at David's house 10 minutes early. I sat in the living room, the same room where Clara had taken her first steps, where we'd opened Christmas presents every year for a decade. Patricia had rearranged the furniture. George's photograph was no longer on the mantel. I noticed. I said nothing. David came in, kissed my cheek, a quick peck, automatic. Patricia followed, all smiles, but her eyes kept flicking to the door. "Mom, thanks for coming," David said. "We just want to talk about some things as a family." "I understand," I said. "I've been wanting to talk too." Patricia's parents arrived first, then her sister and husband, then Patricia's niece. One by one, they filled the living room. 14 people, just like the chat. I sat in a corner chair, watching, counting. When everyone was settled, Patricia stood up. She had that look people get when they're about to deliver news they think you won't like. "Eleanor," she began, "we've been talking as a family, about the future, about you." I waited. "You're 72. You live alone in that big house. The stairs, the maintenance, the yard work. It's a lot. We worry." She glanced at David. He nodded, encouraging her. "We've found a wonderful place, independent living. You'd have your own apartment, but there's help available, meals, activities, people your own age." "And the house?" I asked quietly. Patricia smiled. "Well, that's part of the conversation, too. The house could be sold. The money could help with your care. It just makes sense." I looked at David. "You agree with this?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, we just want what's best for you." The room was silent. 14 people, waiting for my response. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. "Before we go any further," I said, "I want to show you something." I opened Grandma's kitchen and turned the phone toward them. 847 messages, I said, in 6 weeks. Photos of Clara's piano recital, the one I watched on video call from my kitchen because no one told me about it in person. Voice memos from Leo and Maya singing happy birthday to me in the wrong month, just because they felt like it. A sunrise from Marcus, sent with no words, just because he thought I'd like it. I scrolled slowly, letting them see. You built a group chat to talk about me. I built one to talk to them. The difference is love. Patricia's face reddened. David stared at the floor. Right on time, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to Margaret Chen. She's in her early 60s, silver hair, cut sharp, glasses that make her look like she misses nothing. She was carrying a leather briefcase, the same one she'd carried for 20 years. "Mrs. Chen," I said, "thank you for coming." "Of course, Eleanor." She walked into the living room, and I watched 14 people's expressions shift. Confusion, concern. David's face went pale. "Mom, what is this?" Margaret set her briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. She pulled out a stack of documents, thick as a novel, and placed them on the table. "Eleanor asked me to be here today," Margaret said calmly. "She has some documents she'd like to review with everyone." Patricia stood up. "This is a family matter. We don't need—" "Actually," Margaret interrupted, "this is a legal matter, and it involves everyone in this room." She began laying out the documents one by one. "First," she said, "the deed to Eleanor's house. It's in her name only. George's name was removed after his passing, as per their estate plan. Any sale of the property requires Eleanor's signature, not consultation, not discussion, signature." She placed the deed on the table. "Second, the trust." She pulled out another document. "Eleanor established a revocable living trust 15 years ago. I advised her on it myself. The trust holds her savings, her investments, and her property." Patricia's smile was now gone. David was gripping the arm of his chair. "3 weeks ago, Eleanor came to my office and made some changes to the trust. Significant changes." "I'll summarize," Margaret said. "The house and all assets are now divided equally among 4 beneficiaries: Clara Morgan, Leo Morgan, Maya Morgan, and Marcus Reeves. Each will receive their share when they turn 25. A murmur went through the room. Patricia's mother gasped. "But that's not all," Margaret continued. "There's a condition, a clause Eleanor asked me to include." She pulled out one final sheet of paper and began to read. "The trust shall remain intact, and distributions shall proceed on the condition that each beneficiary maintain a meaningful relationship with the grantor during her lifetime. A meaningful relationship is defined as regular communication, including but not limited to texts, calls, visits, or messages in a group chat called Grandma's Kitchen. The grantor's assessment of what constitutes a meaningful relationship shall be final." The room was completely silent. I looked at Clara. She was smiling, trying not to, but I saw it. Margaret closed her briefcase. "I'll leave copies for everyone. If you have questions, you can call my office." She looked at me. "Eleanor, I'll see myself out. Call me if you need anything." She left. The door clicked shut behind her. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Patricia stood up. Her face was red, her hands shaking. You did this, behind our backs, while we were trying to help you?" I looked at her calmly. "You planned a family meeting to discuss my future without me. I planned my future with my grandchildren. One of us was being honest about what we were doing." David finally looked up. His eyes were wet.
"Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know she was going to. I didn't realize."
"Which part?" I asked. "The part where you excluded me from the group chat? The part where you let her plan my life without telling me? Or the part where you sat in this room and let 14 people talk about selling my house?" He had no answer. I stood up slowly. "I'm going to say something now, and I want you all to hear it. I've been a mother for 45 years. I've been a grandmother for 20. I've cooked thousands of meals, changed hundreds of diapers, sat through countless school plays and soccer games and piano recitals. I did it because I loved you, not because I expected anything in return." I looked at Patricia. "But love doesn't mean letting people erase you. It doesn't mean sitting quietly while others decide your future. It doesn't mean accepting that you're a situation to be handled." I picked up my purse. "The trust stands. Clara, Leo, Maya, and Marcus are my beneficiaries. If anyone has a problem with that, you can take it with Margaret Chen. She's very good at her job." I walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back, And Patricia, the next time you want to discuss my house, my future, or my life, my number is in the phone. You're welcome to call. I might even answer." I left. The door closed behind me, and I walked to my car in the cold January air. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I had 847 messages waiting for me in a chat called Grandma's Kitchen. That was 6 months ago. Grandma's Kitchen is at over 1,200 messages now. Clara texts me every morning. Leo and Maya call on weekends. Marcus drove 4 hours last month to bring me a book he thought I'd like, some novel about time travel. He was right. I loved it. David and I are rebuilding. It's slow, careful. He comes over every Sunday now, just him, no Patricia. We sit on the porch and talk about George, about the old days, about what happened. He's trying. I see it. Patricia? She showed up at my door last month, alone. She stood on the porch, not meeting my eyes, and said, "I brought a dish for Sunday dinner, if that's okay." It was a sweet potato casserole. I looked at it, then at her. I said, "There's always room at this table." She cried. I didn't, but I let her in. People make the mistake of thinking quiet women are passive, that if we don't fight, we must not care, that if we don't argue, we must not understand. But quiet is not the same as empty. Quiet is where you listen, where you learn, where you prepare. They left me off the group chat because they thought I was fading. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't fight. I used that time to make sure the people who mattered most would never forget me. That is the only revenge worth having. Here's what I learned, folks. Family isn't about who's in the group chat. It's about who shows up, who texts. Don't have to fight loud to fight well. Sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones building something they can't take away from you. And that something, it's not money, it's not property, it's love. Real love, the kind that shows up in 847 messages and counting. Guard that. Nurture that, and never let anyone make you feel like you're a situation to be handled. You're not a situation. You're a grandmother, and that means something. If this story touched you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me about your own family, your own battles, your own quiet victories. And if you want more stories like this, stories of courage, of quiet strength, of love that refuses to be managed, hit that subscribe button. New videos every day. Take care of yourselves and each other.